You will be shocked when you learn about the strangest superstitions that existed on the front lines of World War II. War is not just the roar of artillery and the clatter of tank tracks. It is a world where logic and strategy coexist with an irrational belief in miracles.
Please protect me and guide me home.
In the hell of trench life, where human life was devalued with each passing day, superstitions, rituals, and talismans were born. Soldiers of all armies, from privates to officers, sought support not only in the strength of their armor or the reliability of their rifles. They clung to small, strange superstitions that gave them the illusion of control over chaos. It was their invisible shield against fear and despair. Watch the video to the end to find out why experienced fighter pilots took children's toys with them on flights and what item found in the pocket of a slain enemy was considered the most powerful talisman. What if I told you that the outcome of an air battle was decided not only by speed and maneuverability, but also by small stuffed toys? For World War II pilots, the cockpit of a fighter plane was at once a workplace, a fortress, and a last refuge. In this confined space, alone with the sky and the enemy, the most unusual and personal superstitions were born. Many pilots had their own talismans, which they always took with them on every combat mission. These could be photographs of loved ones, children's toys, or even items that were completely out of place in the cockpit. For example, the famous Soviet ace Alexander Pokrishkin always took a small stuffed dog with him. These items were not mere trinkets. They were an anchor connecting the pilot to his peaceful life, to the home he so desperately wanted to return to. Touching the talisman before battle was a ritual that helped him gather his courage. There were also entire rituals that were strictly observed. Some always sat on the left side of the cockpit, while others never shaved before takeoff. American bomber pilots often gave their planes female names and painted pin-up girls on the fuselage, believing that this would bring them luck. One of the most common superstitions was not to be photographed before a combat mission. It was considered a bad omen that could bring misfortune. Many pilots who posed for reporters experienced superstitious horror and agreed to be photographed only after much persuasion. They had a special attitude toward the aircraft. The machine was considered a living being with its own character. Before takeoff, they talked to it, stroked its wing, and asked it not to let them down in battle.
We'll be all right.
Each pilot had his own lucky piece of clothing. It could be an old, worn scarf, gloves, or even socks that had not been washed for weeks. It was believed that luck, once accompanying them in battle, accumulated in these items. These habits, strange at first glance, were a form of psychological defense. They created an island of order and predictability in a world where chance decided everything. The belief that you had done everything right gave you confidence in your abilities. I'm very interested to hear your point of view. How much do you think such rituals help soldiers cope with stress? Write about it in the comments. Are you ready to learn the truth about why lighting a third cigarette from a single match was considered deadly dangerous? Unlike pilots, infantrymen had much less personal space, but their world was no less saturated with superstitions. Life in the trenches, with its mud, dampness, and constant anticipation of attack, gave rise to a whole set of unwritten rules and superstitions. The most famous superstition, dating back to World War I, was the third person does not light up from a match. It was believed that while the match was burning and the first soldier was lighting up, an enemy sniper would spot him. When the second soldier brought his cigarette to the flame, the sniper would take aim, and the third soldier, whose face was illuminated, would be hit by a bullet. This superstition was so strong that soldiers of all armies strictly observed it. Anyone who broke this rule could expect serious trouble from their comrades. The match was extinguished after the second person lit up, even if it meant wasting a scarce source of fire. Another common superstition was not to shave before an important battle or offensive. It was believed that a clean-shaven face was a challenge to fate. It was as if you were demonstrating that you were confident of your return, and fate does not like the overconfident. It was also considered bad luck to talk about plans for post-war life in advance. Conversations about how you would return home, get married, or build a house were unspoken taboo. It was tantamount to cursing yourself with misfortune.
All the luck we can get.
Soldiers paid close attention to signs. For example, if a mouse or rat ran away from a dugout, it was considered a sure sign of imminent artillery fire or a direct hit. According to popular belief, rodents sensed danger before humans did. There were also lucky omens. Finding a horseshoe on the battlefield, even if it belonged to an enemy's horse, was considered good luck. It was hung above the entrance to the dugout or carried in a kit bag. Letters from home were treated with special respect. An unread letter in a soldier's breast pocket was considered a powerful talisman. Soldiers believed that nothing could happen to them until they had read the news from their loved ones. Which of these superstitions do you think could have had a real basis, such as the story of 3 people lighting their cigarettes from the same match? But even the most logical omens pale in comparison to the power of personal talismans. Are you ready to find out why a bullet that nearly took a life became the most valuable talisman? What I am about to tell you is banned in 12 countries. Just kidding, but this is a truly unique part of soldier folklore. The most powerful talismans were not purchased amulets, but objects associated with personal experiences of miraculous salvation. They were material proof that fate was smiling on their owner. According to popular belief, bullets or shrapnel that hit a soldier but did not cause serious harm possessed special powers. For example, a bullet stuck in a helmet, a belt buckle, or even a thick book in a breast pocket. Such an item immediately became a personal talisman. A soldier who survived such an event carefully kept this piece of metal. He believed that since this bullet did not take him, others would not either. It was his personal deal with death, his personal sign of being chosen. Sometimes an item belonging to a fallen comrade became a talisman. Taking his watch, lighter, or cigarette case was not an act of looting, but a way to preserve his memory and, as the soldiers believed, to take a piece of his luck, which he no longer needed. This superstition had a downside. It was considered bad luck to take something from a wounded but still living comrade. Doing so could take his wound upon oneself. There were also rituals associated with objects. For example, many soldiers carried a death bullet or last cigarette in their pockets. This was not a reserve for emergencies, but a symbolic object that could not be used under any circumstances. As long as this bullet was in his pocket and the cigarette was not smoked, the soldier believed that his real last hour had not yet come. It was a way to cheat fate by always carrying an untouched final attribute with him. This ritual gave a sense of control over one's own life. Trophy talismans were highly prized. Finding an unusual amulet or medallion in the pocket of a dead enemy soldier was considered double luck. It was believed that such an item possessed the power taken from the enemy and would serve its new owner. Each such talisman was the center of an entire mythology. Stories of miraculous rescues, prophetic dreams, and premonitions were associated with it. These stories were whispered in dugouts, reinforcing the belief in the power of small amulets. Want to know a secret that will change your perception of war? The power of superstition extended not only to objects and actions, but also to abstract concepts such as numbers and names. In a world where life depended on statistics, soldiers created their own mystical numerology. Some numbers were considered unlucky. For example, the U.S. Army tried to avoid the number 13 in everything. If there were 13 people in a unit, it caused general anxiety, and commanders tried to replenish its ranks as soon as possible. Numbers associated with personal dates, such as birthdays and house numbers, were considered lucky. If the number of a tank or aircraft coincided with such a number, it was considered a good sign. The crew believed that their vehicle was under special protection. Special importance was attached to the number of the weapon. If a soldier received a rifle that had been used by another soldier who had fought and survived, it was considered a good omen. The weapon seemed to inherit the luck of its previous owner. Names played an important role. Tanks, aircraft, and even artillery pieces were given their own names. Most often, these were female names, the names of mothers, wives, or lovers. This ritual of animating equipment was important. A nameless piece of metal was transformed into a comrade in arms who would not let them down. The crew took care of their machine as if it were a living being, believing that it would respond in kind. Sometimes the names were formidable or ironic. Soviet tankers might name their vehicle Invulnerable or Avenger. Americans preferred something like Old Betsy or Dear Sue. Some superstitions were related to the names of comrades. It was considered a bad omen if two soldiers with the same name were in the same trench. It was believed that this could confuse death, and it would take one of them. Soldiers avoided saying the word last out loud. Instead of last battle, they said final battle. This superstition is still alive in the Army and among people in dangerous professions. But how did all these personal and group beliefs coexist with official ideology and religion? In the next chapter, we will talk about how soldiers combined prayer with superstition. There are no atheists in war. This phrase became popular during World War II. Faced with constant danger, many soldiers, even those who grew up in atheist countries, turned to higher powers. However, this faith often took bizarre forms, closely intertwined with pagan superstitions. Religious symbols, crosses, icons, mezuzahs, were among the most common talismans. Soldiers wore them on their bodies or hid them in their shirt pockets. These items were a connection not only to God, but also to home, family, and peaceful traditions. Praying before battle was commonplace. Soldiers prayed not only for their lives to be spared, but also for luck in battle, for their hands not to tremble. Often these were not canonical prayers, but simple words from the heart addressed to God. At the same time, religiosity easily coexisted with superstition. A soldier who prayed fervently before an attack could immediately spit over his left shoulder or knock on wood. One did not interfere with the other in his system of survival. Priests and chaplains on the front lines were held in high esteem. They were not only spiritual mentors, but also psychologists. Their blessing before battle was highly valued and considered a powerful protection. However, even here, superstitions played a role. It was considered a good sign to receive a blessing from a lucky chaplain, whose unit had more soldiers returning. Long lines formed to see him. Interestingly, soldiers could use religious items for purposes other than their intended use. For example, a small icon could be sewn into the lining of a greatcoat as a talisman. The text of a prayer written on a piece of paper was carried in a pocket, believing that the words themselves had protective power. Even in the Soviet army, where religion was banned, old beliefs did not disappear. Soldiers secretly wore crosses, and many crossed themselves before battle. Commanders, understanding the psychological importance of this, often turned a blind eye. War created its own religion. It was a belief in survival, where luck was the supreme power. And there were many ways to serve this goddess, through prayer, ritual, and superstitious spitting over one's shoulder. Are you ready for the shocking truth? Sometimes a soldier's most reliable advisor was not his commander or a map, but his own intuition. In a world where danger lurked at every turn, many learned to listen to their inner voice, to dreams and premonitions that often turned out to be prophetic. Dreams on the front lines had special significance. During the short hours of restless sleep, the subconscious processed the horror and tension experienced, sometimes producing surprisingly accurate predictions. Dreams were divided into good and bad. Seeing your home, family, clean water, or bread in a dream was considered a good sign. It meant that the soldier would return alive and that good fortune awaited him. After such a dream, the soldier went into battle with renewed confidence. Bad dreams were those that featured fallen teeth, dirt, or dead relatives. Such a dream was a warning of danger. A soldier who had a bad dream became extremely cautious and tried not to take unnecessary risks. Many veterans recalled instances when dreams literally saved their lives. Someone dreamed that a shell was hitting his dugout, woke up and moved to another one. and a few hours later, his old shelter was indeed hit directly. Such stories quickly spread across the front, reinforcing the belief in prophetic dreams. In addition to dreams, premonitions played a huge role. It was a sudden, irrational feeling of anxiety or, conversely, confidence. Experienced soldiers learned to trust this feeling. If a seasoned fighter was overcome by sudden anxiety, he might refuse to walk down a certain path or enter a seemingly safe house. Often it turned out that there was a mine or an ambush there. This was called gut feeling. This was not pure mysticism. Most likely the subconscious picked up and analyzed the smallest details that the conscious mind did not notice. A broken branch, fresh soil, unnatural silence. All this added up to a danger signal, which was perceived as a premonition. Do you think it is possible to develop such intuition, or is it an innate gift? But even the strongest premonition could not protect against everything. In the next chapter, we will talk about how superstitions help to cope with the most frightening aspect of war, the loss of comrades. War is a series of losses. Every day, soldiers lost friends with whom they had shared cigarettes and bread that morning. To cope with this and not go mad, they created their own farewell rituals, which helped them survive their grief and preserve the memory of the fallen. Official funerals with salutes and honors were rare on the front lines. Most often, comrades were buried hastily in mass graves during brief lulls in the fighting. Therefore, personal, informal rituals took on special significance. One of the main traditions was not clinking glasses. The third toast at the memorial table was always made in silence, without clinking glasses. This tradition, born in battle, is still alive in many countries today. Every time a unit lost a soldier, his comrades made a silent vow to avenge him. Revenge was not just a thirst for retribution, but a way to give meaning to the death of a friend. It turned grief into action, into energy directed at the enemy. The belongings of the fallen comrade were distributed among his friends. This was not a division of property, but a ritual of preserving memory. Carrying the cigarette case or watch of a fallen friend meant that he continued to live with you. In your memory, there was a belief that the soul of a fallen soldier remained with his unit, protecting it. Many soldiers mentally turned to their fallen friends for advice or support in difficult moments. They became guardian angels of their platoon or company. After a successful battle in which the death of a comrade was avenged, soldiers could hold a symbolic memorial service. They drank his Narcom's 100 grams and shared memories of him. This helped them let go of the pain and move on with their lives. These rituals were vital for maintaining mental health. They allowed them not to devalue death, not to turn it into statistics. Each deceased soldier remained a person, a comrade who was remembered and honored. In the harsh male world of war, there was also a place for a special category of talismans, those associated with women. These items, sent from home by mothers, sisters, and lovers, possessed, in the opinion of the soldiers, a special protective power. They were a symbol of love and peaceful life for which this war was being fought. One of the most powerful amulets was a tobacco pouch embroidered by the hands of a beloved woman. It was often embroidered with initials or a short phrase such as, "I'm waiting for you," or "Come back victorious." Soldiers believed that such an item, imbued with love and care, could deflect a bullet. Shawls, scarves, and gloves knitted by a mother or sister were also valued as much as gold. They were worn constantly, even in warm weather. It was believed that the warmth of a mother's hands, woven into the fabric, would keep the soldier warm and protect him on the battlefield. Photographs of loved ones were a must-have for every soldier. They were kept in a breast pocket, close to the heart. Before battle, the photograph was taken out, kissed, and mentally bid farewell with a promise to return. Letters were endowed with special power. A letter from a loved one, written on perfumed paper, was a message from another, almost forgotten world. It was reread dozens of times and then carefully stored, believing that it would protect against misfortune. Sometimes a lock of hair sent in a letter became a talisman. It was sewn into the lining of a shirt or kept in a locket. It was the most intimate and powerful amulet, a piece of a loved one that was always close by. Even the name of a loved one scratched on the butt of a rifle or on the armor of a tank was considered protection. It was a dedication that transformed a weapon from a simple tool into an instrument of defense for one's love and home. This belief in female protection was universal among soldiers of all armies. It showed that even in the epicenter of cruelty and destruction, love remained the most important value for a person. It was love that gave hope that the war would end someday. Superstitions had no nationality. On the other side of the front, in the German trenches, soldiers sought protection from talismans and omens in exactly the same way. Although their symbols and rituals differed, the essence remained the same, an attempt to gain control over their destiny. Runic symbols were popular in the German army, especially in the SS units. Ancient Scandinavian runes, such as Zig or Algies, were applied to equipment, weapons, and even tattooed on the body. These symbols were believed to have mystical powers. Ordinary Wehrmacht soldiers more often relied on more traditional amulets. These were religious medallions, lucky coins, or family photographs. A belt buckle with the inscription Gott mit uns, God with us, was also perceived by many as a talisman. American soldiers, or GIs, brought their own superstitions to the battlefield. A very popular talisman was the Zippo lighter. Its reliability and ability to burn in the wind made it indispensable in the trenches, and names, dates, or lucky symbols were often engraved on its body. A four-leaf clover was a lucky charm for Americans. Its image could be seen painted on helmets, planes, and tanks. A dried clover leaf found at home was often carried in a wallet. Dice were also popular among the GIs. A pair of dice in your pocket was considered a symbol of good luck. Before battle, they were often thrown to try to guess one's fate. All these examples show that superstitious thinking is a universal feature of the human psyche in extreme conditions. Regardless of language, ideology, and uniform color, soldiers at war remain, first and foremost, human beings. And it is human nature to seek hope and believe in miracles. The war ended, but the superstitions born in its trenches did not disappear. Many of them became firmly entrenched in army culture and even migrated into civilian life. This legacy shows how deeply war leaves its mark on people's minds. The tradition of not clinking glasses at a memorial table, the prohibition on saying last instead of final, all of this came to us from the battlefields. We use these expressions, often without even thinking about their tragic origins. They have become part of our cultural code. Many veterans kept their combat talismans until the end of their lives. A worn cigarette case, a charmed bullet, or a faded photograph were not just souvenirs for them. They were witnesses to their survival, symbols of their personal victory over death. The experience of war taught these people to pay closer attention to signs and premonitions. Many of them admitted that even in peacetime, they often trust their intuition, which has saved them more than once in battle. This skill stays with a person forever. The study of soldiers' superstitions is important not only for historians and anthropologists. It helps us to better understand human psychology in extreme situations. It shows what defense mechanisms our consciousness activates in order to cope with unbearable horror. These beliefs were not a sign of weakness or ignorance. On the contrary, they were a manifestation of strength of spirit, a desperate will to live. It was a form of resistance to the dehumanizing and destructive force of war. Today, when we look at old military photographs, we see more than just soldiers in uniform. Behind each face lies a world of its own, with its own history, its own little secrets, and its own strange superstitions. These details make them alive, understandable, and close to us. Soldiers' talismans and superstitions are a quiet voice from the past. They remind us that even in the darkest times, people never stop believing, hoping, and seeking support. And often they find it in the simplest and most unexpected things. We have delved into the hidden, irrational world of frontline superstitions that existed alongside the official chronicle of the war. From children's toys in fighter cockpits to charmed bullets in infantrymen's pockets, these strange beliefs were as much a weapon as a rifle or grenade. They protected not the body, but the soul of the soldier, helping him to keep his sanity and hope. These stories show us another side of war. Not the ceremonial and heroic, but the deeply personal and human. They prove that even in the epicenter of chaos and death, people desperately seek order, meaning, and faith in miracles. And this faith, albeit clothed in bizarre forms, helped them survive and win. Which of these soldiers' superstitions did you find most surprising? Suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see on our channel in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new episodes.